Welcome back. Now, in a swift response to recent controversies, President Ramaphosa appointed Buti Manamela as the new Minister of Higher Education and Training. This decision follows the ousting of Dr. Mbulelo Mandlana, which was announced yesterday. Now, joining me to take this discussion forward, I'd like to welcome the South African Communist Party spokesperson, Mbulelo Mandlana. Mbulelo, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Mbulelo, obviously, Buti Manamela, is no stranger to the South African Communist Party. This decision to bring him on as the Higher Education Minister, good decision by President Ramaphosa?
We think it's an excellent decision. It's a decision that is excellent because, as you have said at the beginning, Comrade Manamela has a vast experience in higher education. He has been a deputy minister for various ministers in higher education. In that way, he has looked at all aspects that have to do with the work of the department, and indeed, having grown and developed politically as a young person, was a student leader, the highest levels he achieved in the National Executive Committee of the South African Students' Congress. All of these things combined give him the sort of experience that is not only relevant, but almost guarantees him a good footing to begin a tenure as a Minister of Higher Education.
How does the SACP react to opposition parties? And of course, they have every right to go ahead and voice their dissatisfaction, which seems that way, that this is yet another deployee from the tripartite alliance.
Well, when they say so, they are looking for the lowest common denominator in their act of criticizing. Well, in the many instances, they are not saying he's unqualified. Number two, they are not saying he's inexperienced. Number three, they are not saying he's an outsider to higher education. And they are saying none of these things because if they would say that, they would know it's not true. Comrade Manamela is suitable, he is qualified, he is experienced, he has proven himself over time as a person who has grown to be extremely competent on matters to do with higher education. If that were not so, the work that he has done in that department, in that sector actually, he would not have succeeded to do. He would not have the longevity that he has had in the space to stand across from that kind of logic is really to fail as a critical thinking person if they hope to be one. The comrades, the people who oppose or rather criticize this disappointment, because in truth they really have no leg to stand on.
Yeah. The CETAs has come under sharp focus. This is obviously the reason why Nkabane was obviously sacked. The fact that there were many ANC-linked individuals within the CETA boards. Is there a concern that this could be a sort of repeat with Minister Manamela coming into the frame? And how does he go ahead and try and change that perception, given that, of course, CETA is quite an important part of how we deal with higher education within this country?
That's an important point to make because part and parcel of the work of higher education is to deal with the skills authority institutions. And those CETAs, as the Communist Party, we view them as a very important component of the skills revolution. And the skills revolution is an important function and mandate of higher education. In his tenure as deputy minister, Comrade Manamela had dealt with many of these issues. And we do think that his exposure allows him to do this more comfortably, for example, in comparison to the comrade he is replacing, who had not had at the high level the amount of experience and exposure that Comrade Manamela has. And what do we say about the mandate of the sitters? One, we think that the sitters need to be really revitalized because they play an important role in shaping the skills landscape in South Africa. The structure and the systems of the sitters have been exploited a lot by people who want to create economic benefits that are more private and that have nothing to do with the public good for which those institutions are supposed to do. They have been victim indeed for a lot of people who have attempted in many instances to exploit them in a manner that weakens their structure, to lessen their efficacy, and sometimes to even question their whole legitimacy. So the Communist Party, we think that the mandate for Comrade Manamela is to reclaim sitters from the private sector that does not want to work with government in terms of fulfilling the mandate of the sitters. From the private sector and private role players who do not appear at least to have a full appreciation of what the sitters must achieve, except only in as far they are seen by those individuals as useful to their economic and other forms of negative ambitions.
NSFAS, Mbulelo, has of course been another highly discussed point. Of course, we've seen a lot of changes happening there. What is it that the SACP wants from Minister Manamela to go ahead and try and get NSFAS back on track? I had, of course, the South African Union of Students earlier, and they said funding, get the funding right, because students are not getting the necessary funding that they have applied for. Your response to that?
Of course, while we are having this conversation, we must also say we are not, as the Communist Party, in having this kind of, in participating in this kind of discourse, are preempting the technical workings of the department. That work is on the shoulders of Comrade Manamela, as the minister who we have all the confidence that he will be in a position and really deliver on the question of repositioning the department, repositioning the institutions inside the department, and therefore directing the sector in the right kind of path. We have no doubt about that. So while we may discuss the way we do, an impression must not be made that the Communist Party is right now volunteering a set of instructions about what to do and what not to do. But let me comment on NSFAS. NSFAS is one of those institutions that are key to the sector. But you will realize that NSFAS, just like many institutions that are government institutions that have, of course, relative autonomy, whether it's PRASA, whether it's SAA, and so on and so forth, those institutions have been under a whole lot of pressure in the recent time, not just on underperformance, but also on insufficient funding of the institutions themselves, because the fiscus in South Africa has been redirected under the auspices of tightening the budget, under the auspices of cost cutting, really under the agenda of the government of austerity. In the context of austerity as the overlying principle by which resources are allocated and importance of issues is determined in the state, and as far as is and we believe that has been affected negatively. There's been a lot of complaints about it being unable to meet its objectives, in being able to meet its targets in terms of funding. So why Comrade Manamela goes into government? He goes into government as a minister in this instance under the conditions of a tightening budget, under the conditions of a government that is moving towards austerity, under the conditions of a weakening state that itself is facing a lot of challenges. We are not naive about that reality. We are not naive as a Communist Party about that reality. Hence, our programs against austerity have always been standing programs. What we have advocated against austerity has been a consistent kind of a messaging from the Communist Party. So the NSFAS and other institutions that have to do with the sector right now operate under these circumstances, and we believe that Comrade Manamela will have to maneuver in the context of these limiting challenges. This means that the struggle for the Communist Party against austerity will continue despite the fact that Comrade Manamela himself, because he himself does not act as an individual, he functions within the framework of the determinations of the state. But whatever happens, our agenda to fight against austerity will continue despite this fact.
Mbulelo, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Thank you, sir.
That's Mbulelo Mandlana, the spokesperson for the South African Communist Party. Well, that's all we have for you here on News in Focus. We'll see you again on Thursday. Tomorrow is, of course, Talking Point. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.